I'm your host, Janelle Shalini, here today to bring you news on COVID-19, the widespread disease that has infected over 700,000 people and killed a staggering 35,000. The virus, similar to the one that caused the 2003 SARS outbreak, but unargumentably spreads much faster, causes respiratory illnesses and flu-like symptoms. It originally appeared in Wuhan, China, and is speculated to be linked to a seafood market. Despite the widespread health and economic impacts that COVID-19 causes, China officials actually found out about the virus weeks before it was officially reported to the rest of the world, even silencing whistleblowers in a bid to contain the spread of information. When China announced the outbreak of a mysterious pneumonia that could only be spread through animal-human transmission on the 31st of December, officials reported the first case of the disease started showing symptoms on the 12th of December. Yet, scientific reports revealed that the outbreak started weeks or months earlier than China let on. The late Dr. Li Wenliang, now regarded as a national hero, also announced to his friends on the 31st of December via WeChat of a SARS-like pneumonia at a hospital he worked in. However, Chinese officials took action to contain the spread of information, issuing a warning letter to 8 doctors, including Dr. Li, for spreading rumors online. Furthermore, despite cases of infected doctors by the 11th of January, Chinese officials persisted that human-to-human transmission was impossible and that there were no cases of infected doctors. It was only on the 19th of January that they admitted human-to-human transmission was possible and that information about the virus was intentionally kept from the public. Many believe that China's silence facilitated the exodus of some 5 million people before the city of Wuhan was quarantined on January 22nd, helping to transport the virus all over the world. Research also found that cases would have been reduced by 66% if interventions in the country had been conducted even 1 week earlier. This begs the question, caught between the choice of revealing the information to the world and hiding it, did China make the right decision? I took to the streets of Singapore to find out what the stance that the youth took, and what they think drove China to its ultimate decision. Oh, hi, excuse me.
Hi.
Can I just ask you some questions regarding your opinion on the COVID-19 situation?
Okay, I guess.
Okay, sure. You can just take a seat. What is your name?
Hui Shan.
Okay, are you working now or are you still a student?
I'm still a student.
Okay, so I just wanted to find out, do you think China was wrong for delaying the release of information to the public about the coronavirus?
I think for me, right, I know there's a lot of debates these days, but I think that it's important to understand the context behind why China did what they did. So we have to consider their culture and how they've always behaved historically. So something that I learned in class is the Hofstede's cultural dimensions, which measures the way countries behave on a scale of 100. So there are some dimensions like indulgence, power distance, long-term orientation, and masculinity. The higher the score, the higher the tendency to behave in a certain way. Countries have differing scores, they might not be able to understand each other. Yeah.
So how does this explain China's actions?
I think there's one dimension that we can look at it, it's called indulgence. So China has a very low score on the indulgence index, which means that it's a very restrained society. So in that case, people tend to be raised under very strict regulations under the government. So they have limited free speech and limited liberties, and they get very harsh punishments when they do something wrong. So this could explain why there are very few people who spoke out against the government. And the voices that counter the government's voice were actually silenced because they've always been used to clamping down free speech. And another thing is that they score very high on the power distance index, which means that they really differentiate people who have a lot of power and people with low power. And in that case, people with high power have a lot more status and privilege compared to those who don't. And subordinates are very unlikely to stand up against their superiors. So the government can be identified as a superior in this case. So it could be why no one was willing to express their disagreements about the initial spread of the virus in China, except a very few people who were eventually silenced anyway. Thirdly, there was another index I learned in class called the Long-Term Orientation Index. China ranks very high on that, which means that it's a very pragmatic society. So in this kind of society, I also learned that the truth depends very much on situation, context, and time. It could be possible that the Chinese government believes that the most pragmatic approach at that point of time was to, stay calm and not cause widespread panic. So they silenced people who were warning the rest about the severity of the situation. And finally, the last index I would want to share about is the masculinity index. So China is ranks very high on the masculinity index, which means that the society is kind of driven by competition, achievement, and success. In this case, China's need to ensure success can be exemplified by how they were willing to sacrifice individuals they thought because they believed that it would benefit the country as a whole and for the pride of the country. But this doesn't mean that they didn't care about the people. It could be that beneath the surface they're doing a lot of things, but on the surface they want to show that they are controlling it well, so that they will be successful in this whole pandemic situation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good points made by Krisha. Now I'm gonna find some other people to ask.
Oh, hi!
Hey, you see, all the bars closed.
Hi, excuse me.
Yes.
Will you gentlemen care to have a conversation with me? Can just take a seat.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to find out your take on this whole COVID-19 situation. Do you think what China did was ethical when they delayed the spreading of information to the world?
Okay, so I feel that China, what they did was very unethical. So firstly, they actually broke certain rules of deontology. So with regards to like the scientists saying all this, right? They broke, let's say, categorical imperative. People should have the freedom to get information, but then they blocked the Chinese people from getting information. Next, practical imperative, they actually violate this rule. They sacrifice people of Hubei province just to maintain their own goals of maintaining political control. Lastly, they broke the golden rule. You should not do unto others what you wanted them to do to you. So you block them from getting information. You're not going to be happy when they block information to you. So that's why I think China is unethical. Next, using utilitarianism. So China's saying that the ends justify the means. But then the thing is that China, by blocking all these whistleblowers, they actually resulted in this whole situation escalating. Because you never tell people, after they go and travel, they go and do whatever activities, that could have facilitated the spread of the virus. And because of that, I think that the Chinese government actions are unethical.
I agree with you. But I think there might have been some miscalculation of the utility of the actions. And the Chinese government may now have known that the severity of the entire situation in the beginning, and at the point of time, they would not have known that the virus would spread so easily and result in so many deaths. Perhaps they wanted to find out more before releasing any information about the virus. Hypothetically, if the virus did not turn out the way it is, it might not turn out so bad, right? Doctors might have released negative information that might have caused widespread panic, that might have severe implications for the Chinese government, and as such, the Chinese government action may not be that unethical.
Wait, but see, I still got another point. You see, China actually used moral justification to sort of like cover up their actions.
Tell me why.
They go and portray their actions as very, for the greater good of the country. You got to maintain, the social stability, you don't want people to panic. But then, all in all, they're just covering up the fake news. So, China is actually very unethical.
Okay, well, I now want to know what models do you think China used to arrive at this decision?
Okay, I have a lot to say on this. So, let me tell you, okay, upon making the models of judgment and decision making, we may decipher the methods upon which China reacted to the pandemic, as well as the potential cognitive biases that might have directed their decisions, albeit poorly. The biases that China has acted upon were mental shortcuts in actions, in part due to the short reaction time allocated, and in part due to the existence of past protocols such as reaction to SARS. While timely, it may have introduced errors into China's thinking. So this is an argument of intuition versus rationality. So first, let's talk about bounded rationality. It's a response to a complex problem by reducing the problem to an easily understood level. So China simplified the problem to an issue of immediate national identity, which they saw as the potential of rebellion by the Chinese citizens. If they had managed to hide it, they would be able to avoid a huge controversy and criticism from outside sources, and thus choose to cover up the situation in act of saving face. The immediate reaction to a situation may be described as a reiteration of previous solution, as first seen in SARS, which presented itself as the first available option, if not the most optimal. This form of thinking focused on a narrow set of criteria, being self-preserving for the government, which provided an inaccurate estimation of the situation, and this inevitably lead to the gross miscalculation of severity and ultimately sacrifice the original intentions along with hundreds and thousands of lives of the citizens. My next point is confirmation bias. Overestimation of information that's available where information that comes to mind is perceived as most representative. So information presented to the Chinese government is selective and identified with positive outlook on the pandemic. Any other form of information that does not coincide with this aforementioned and biased selection of news are immediately silenced. For example, news organizations were threatened not to spread fake news and were forced to sign a contract that stated that previously stated information were false, even if there were clear signs presented in opposite direction. To a certain extent, the Chinese government may have underestimated the situation and perceived it as an issue that could be swept under the rug. As such, confirmation bias is formed and delays the situation to uncontrollable pandemic. My next point, Abelin's paradox. A situation where a group may make a collective decision that is counter to the thoughts and feelings of individual members. So, information was clearly a major factor in this decision-making process of the situation. The techniques presented by the government and its stance were ignored in favour of the collective decision of the government to cover up the incident and its severity. This is seen in the silencing of dissemination of information and naysayers as evidenced by the disappearance of Dr. Li Wenliang. Ideas that were in opposition to the government were of individuals despite positions of authority and power. The government clearly acted, in popular opinion of its own, that the situation would not get worse, as well as the tangible benefits of hiding the crisis from its citizens and the rest of the world. My next point is escalation of commitment. It is a sunk cost fallacy that justifies past choices, irrational behavior, but aligned with previous decisions. And China has reportedly been using WeChat and Twitter to find and silence people sharing coronavirus information, pushing the individual's friends to ask about whereabouts in the US. Another case would be that officials visited the individual's house in Dongguan and telling him that his tweet was an attack on the Chinese government, confiscated his phone and made him sign a statement to not repeat the so-called threat. China evidently has failed to realize its own mistake of covering up the pandemic and only finally making known when things become serious, and is still insistent on its past actions to cover up for her misdeeds. Their actions mirror that of the SARS reaction, which saw the cover-up of a deadly virus and acted upon a similar intuition. Although irrational, they align with previous decisions, and they might be affected the ideology moving forward during the situation, as per sunk cost fallacy. To reiterate, the actions escalated in severity in the crisis heightens. In an attempt to justify the past choices, the Chinese government chooses to maintain the current state, which may signify status quo bias, and the sacrifices made by the citizens of China who had gone against the government were justified as the ends justify the means, and all would be justified if they had successfully quelted the crowd and hid the situation.
Wait, but then you say China's so bad, right? But then China's decision to actually use the intuition model might not be that bad. If there were past models and experiences that were successful in the management of a dire crisis, it would be pertinent to deliver a swift response simply due to the lives you can save with speed. As the death toll is exponential to the spread, the sooner a response is made, the better. Furthermore, their decision was made as a collective, which often will disperse incorrect solutions, utilizing the resources of the group and improving their problem-solving ability. However, it is evident that the priority regarding this scenario was not the lives of the people, nor were the group utilizing their resources to solve the crisis, but rather to hide it. Their usage of time was done in a manner to delay the inevitable, which may have in part be due to the group dynamic that enabled diffusion of responsibility to the lives of the Chinese citizens. As such, it's impossible to morally validate the Chinese government.
Okay, thank you for your points. Wow, what a heated debate from those two. Oh, hi, excuse me. Do you want to join us for a conversation?
Sure. Is this the camera?
Yeah, but
Oh.
you actually have to sit here.
okay,
If not,
okay.
you're too close.
Sure.
So,
Hello.
Yeah, make yourself comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out, among all the criticism that China is receiving for its role in the virus outbreak, do you think that they actually did anything right when it came to handling the outbreak?
Okay, so before we decide how right is China in handling the outbreak, let us keep in mind that China is a traditional and conservative country where there lies a strong history and culture that made it a global power like what it is currently. And today I'm going to break it down for you. Eliminate biases in their considerations and look at things from a fresh point of view. Initially, China was criticized by the WHO for their slow response and for intentionally hiding the virus from the public. This decision encapsulates many of their cultural biases, and in my humble opinion, a more globally accepted and objective decision would be to consult the WHO on this new virus, as although this new virus is related genetically to SARS, the symptoms and outcomes are widely different. So following that, China broadened the criteria for coronavirus cases. From the initial laboratory confirmed cases, citizens were left out under the old counting system for those exhibiting symptoms of the disease but not yet tested positive would now be added to the list of cases. In doing so, they were applauded by WHO for a move towards transparency. However, the fact that they skewed their criteria in order to portray a better image and downplay the seriousness of the virus lack the transparency towards the world. Personally, in my humble opinion, I feel that China should employ a rational decision-making system. They need to begin by identifying the aforementioned biases and recognize themselves in these biases. To counteract their sunk cost behavior, they need to seek out the views of the citizens on the matter. They should also examine why admitting to an earlier mistake distresses the government's image, and instead be ready to apologize for the loss of lives. China should definitely be more aware of potential sunk cost biases in their decisions and recommendations from the citizens, and even potentially reassign responsibilities to these naysayers to call out on their future mistakes. This provides an outside, unbiased advisor to serve as a sounding board during a critical decision-making process, who has no vested interest in this situation. Techniques such as the devil's advocacy and dialectical inquiry can help stimulate constructive debate and protect against cognitive biases. All in all, it's in my view that China's cultural biases had led them to garner widespread criticism, and they definitely could have done better through their actions.
Friend, I disagree with your opinions. Let's take a look at what China did. So China has done well in several aspects. Firstly, the scale of containment efforts has been extraordinary. Almost 60 million people were placed under lockdown in Hubei province alone. This could be attributed to the concept of loss aversion. The Chinese government recognized the huge loss of lives as the number of cases started to surpass 70,000 and thereby switched from saving their reputation to saving lives instead. Top officials including Hubei and Wuhan's top political leaders were fired for underreporting figures, threatening whistleblowers and mishandling the outbreak in Hubei. This can be seen as a move towards greater transparency and information control. So in the case of healthcare, new hospitals were constructed. The testing capacity of laboratories also rapidly expanded. Temporary isolation facilities were set up in gymnasiums and event halls to relieve pressure on hospitals. WHO also commended China on its most effective measures, which involves extremely proactive surveillance to detect cases, extensive testing and immediate isolation of patients, rigorous tracking and quarantine of close contacts. For instance, deploying drones to remind citizens to wear masks in public and security guards on patrol of every residence to make sure citizens don't violate the government's containment measures. In conclusion, I feel that China has been trying to make up for its past mistakes in an attempt to restore the international image as they were criticized for their mishandling of the outbreak. While it's true that the Chinese central government is carrying out stringent measures in dealing with the pandemic, these measures have been proven successful as seen from the dip in recent cases.
Dear friend, while I do agree to your points, I do concur to mine too.
Great job!
I cannot, sia.
Yeah,